Welcome, everybody. It is good to have you all here. And we are talking about my favorite subject, which is memories and adding memories to help enhance our profiles on Family Search and also adding memories just to get to know our ancestors. I entitled this class, and it's such a long title. We're going to have to just read it together. Turning Memories to Magic, Bringing Your Ancestors to Life with Memories Using Artifact, Photos, and Stories to Go Beyond the Ordinary with Family History. So we could also say bringing your ancestors to life with memories using artifacts. And then we could end our title there because photos are artifacts, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to add stories to all of our different artifacts. And so let's first talk about what an artifact is. In museums, in geology, in anthropology, we hear a lot about artifacts. And what an artifact is a human-made object which physically exists in a place at different moments in time. And it can contain historical and cultural memories. Now, today we also have digital artifacts, but they're still created at a certain point in time. Mostly, we are going to deal with a physical artifact, so a human-made object, which our ancestors may have used, and we may have possession of, or someone we know may have possession of. And we'll get into what that exactly is. But when we have an object that has either been handed down to us, given to us, or that we have found, we want to ask a few questions about it. What stories does this artifact tell? What memories, what cultural memories does it hold? What family heritage exists within this object? And so when we're thinking about an object that exists at a certain place in time, we may think of antiques, but it doesn't necessarily have to be something that is old. So here are three items about artifacts that are interesting. The first is that historians examine artifacts in order to better understand the culture of the humans who made them. So when we have an artifact and we're studying it or thinking about it, for instance, maybe something that a parent has passed down to us, maybe something that we've gotten from a grandparent, by studying that and thinking about it, we can better understand the culture of the humans who made them, or the humans who owned them, rather. So we're talking about things that our ancestors had that we can learn from more about their lives by studying the artifact. So I like this idea of a family artifact. So we know that an actual artifact is a physical item. A family artifact is a physical item that has special value to your family because it belonged to someone who is no longer living, was given to you by a parent or grandparent, or tells an important story about someone in your family. So we are going to explore some examples and ideas of how to take that physical item given to us or held by us and extracting the story from that item. So we may think, oh, this is just a wooden spoon that my grandmother used to cook. So I've got a lot of things that my grandmother used. And they are things that are seemingly unimportant, but when we really dig into the history and the use and how they're connected to that person, we can glean a lot of information. So again, the main reason that things are special to us is that the ancestor is no longer with us and can no longer tell us their story in person. The artifact becomes a vessel for their story or stories. So let's think about a couple questions. I'd like you to think of something that you may have, whether it is a photograph of someone that means something to you, or an item that is meaningful to you. I mentioned I do have my grandmother's wooden spoon that she used the life out of that spoon. It was just whittled away to almost nothing. And it was interesting to me that was always the spoon she chose to cook with. And so she put a lot of life into that spoon. So let's just think about this. How can these artifacts connect us across time to our historical, cultural, and familial heritage and to the living world around us and even to future generations? My daughters, one of them or both of them who are listening to this class, are going to be the lucky recipients of some of these artifacts that I will pass on to them. Things that were used by my grandmother, my great grandmother, that will pass on to them. So, how can we creatively relate to these artifacts so as to enhance their meaning in our lives? Here are some reasons why it is good to preserve artifacts. And I have to say, I love old things. I always have since I was a little girl. But I have family members who really don't, who just say, oh, it's old, let's just throw it away. But I am just, I just want to save everything. And I always have felt that way, felt a connection with things that have been used, especially by my family members and those that I loved and knew. When we have an artifact, it is important. These are a few reasons why it's important to preserve it. One, it gives us an emotional connection. Our artifacts can give us links to our ancestors and bring up emotions that we may have felt with that ancestor. So just using my grandma's wooden spoon as an example, I really do think about her every time I use that spoon. Every time I look at it, I think about it. I think about, wow, what meals were made with this spoon? And because it is a very, very old spoon, I think about how long has she had this? Where did she get it? Did maybe her mother have it before? So I really do feel an emotional connection. It can be educational to preserve our artifacts. So it can help people learn about our family's unique experiences, contributions, and the broader historical implications. That's another reason. The third reason is that family artifacts can be a way to share family history with future generations. They can connect generations who have never met. So, like I said, I have got all these wonderful things that my lucky daughters are going to be able to enjoy after I am gone. And I need to make sure that these things have stories behind them and have the information passed on so that it's not just a piece of junk, so that we can connect stories and family history to our items. So here are just a few little artifacts that we are talking about that we could keep. And I think there I go. I passed that. Okay. So these are just a few things that are artifacts that are good to keep. And we also know that many things today can be digitized. So there's no reason for, at the very least, keeping a digital record of an artifact. So for instance, you can see here financial records. So what that is this is the ledger, a logbook that my great grandfather kept. And he talks about the food he bought for his animals. He talks about the horses and cows that he sold and how much he got for them. And it's such a treasure to me to see that information there in his handwriting. And I can learn a lot from that. Now, it's not always feasible to keep every every single thing like this that we have. And so it's always good to have a digitized backup of this. So a photograph with a story attached to it. So we have personal histories and journals, handiwork and recipes, memorabilia, school and work records. I'm lucky enough to have, again, this is my great grandfather's little report card. And it's just amazing to me that I actually have that. Photographs, newspaper articles, family Bibles, church records, letters, awards and programs, landmarks and maps, and then other things that I have not put on here. Here are some other artifacts to keep. So we have jewelry, household items like this spoon, cups, and dishes. So because I am the keeper of all the old things, everybody always likes to give things to me. I have 3 sets of china given to me by 2 of my grandmothers and another from my father's ex-wife. So a step grandmother, because she knew I would enjoy that. We have photos, we have military items, scrapbooks, artwork made by family members, a family home. I recently talked to one of my neighbors who was telling me that she and her husband were buying her grandmother's little house, and she said to me, I just want to preserve it like a little museum for my family and we can gather there. And I thought, well, that is a very big artifact, but it is something that she's able to do. And it's kind of amazing. I mean, a family home, recipes, quilts, handmade textiles. So I have a little apron that my mother made when she was in 4-H, clothing, musical instruments. So anything that was attached to a person that meant something to you can be an artifact. I guess I would like to hear from you on any maybe interesting artifacts that you might have. If you want to put it in our chat, and then the Esplins can tell us if anybody said anything. Okay, so we have got a lot of stuff, right? Some of us may not have artifacts from our families. And in that case, I like to think about maybe the era of when a family member lived and a location. And the internet can be just a great tool for that, for finding artifacts, for finding pictures of artifacts that our ancestors may have used. So maybe if an artifact is mentioned in a journal or a story or anything like that, we can always find something similar to what they used and use that as, kind of adopt it as our artifact. So family artifacts can be sentimental and emotionally value, helping to preserve memories of loved ones. We've already talked a little bit about that. They can be a source of inspiration or a way to teach generations about the past. And I love this next one. If you don't have any sentimental attachment to the heirlooms and there's no one in your family that wants them, I am the only one in my family that really wants the 3 sets of china. Most other people have said, nope, we don't want that junk in our lives. So a very good thing to consider is to donate them to a museum, a historical society, or another cultural institution. So we all appreciate people that have donated things to museums and historical societies and such. Choose items that hold sentimental value and tell family stories that make sense logistically for you to preserve. So, not all of us are going to be able to have grandma's house as an artifact, but we can have a wooden spoon, right? How do we make this more than just a wooden spoon? Okay, I'm looking in the chat here, and Gordon says, oh, wow, we have some good things here. Let me go all the way. Journals, books, and stories. Thank you, Abigail. That's a good one. Lindsay has my father's alto saxophone. The story that belongs to it is that I had played it and my uncle has also played it. So wow, that's an amazing thing. Gordon says, I have things that my grandparents have made, a model sailboat. I used to sail when I was young. snowshoes they wore in 1920, and jewelry that my grandmother made. Oh, wow. That's so cool. And I'm sure that that sailboat and many of those items just have so many memories. Okay, Robert said, I have my grandmother's sewing machine and my aunt's crochet items. Oh, I love that. Okay, John he said, I have my father's amazingly made fishing pole, and I used to go fishing with him as a child. So I I just love the thought that that really that's part of your dad, was put into that fishing pole, the effort. Okay, Sarah says, my grandmother made replicas of her grandmother's wedding dress for my cousins and I for our 23-inch dolls in the 1950s. She produced them from the February 7th, 1842 wedding portrait of Mary Ann Peyton and John Hogan. Wow. Okay, that is really amazing. That is truly, truly amazing. And then we have Sully said, I have a family portrait from 1906 that was carried from Germany, found in 2000, and has allowed us to reconnect with European cousins after 50 plus years. Thank you everybody for sharing. And Gordon mentions that their children have started putting sticky notes with their names on things they want. All right. I love that. I love that. And then Karen, this is a really good point. If you were an academic, save the notes on work published or taught. Okay, true. I know my mother does have her master's thesis, her nursing master's thesis that she saved. Yes, things like that, definitely. And also they can be digitized. So thank you everyone for sharing those things. Okay. So now I'm going to give you a few examples. And honestly, I go into this a lot more, the technical aspect of how to do things in some of my other classes, which I will reference at the end. And you can look at them if you're interested in. But I'll give you just a few examples of artifacts that I have found meaningful and what I've done with them. But first, we're going to talk about how to do them, how to do this, how to use an artifact. So if we have something and it is put away in a shoebox and never seen and never handled, never dealt with, then it's not really serving any purpose. I think maybe in some of these cases, if there's no one interested, it's good to digitize those and get them at least visibly available so that people can see them and enjoy them. So I like this idea of using family artifacts in your home if you can. And maybe you don't enjoy antiques, but I challenge you to try this out. Just try putting a few things out. I have got on my wall a beautifully colored marriage license that was used for my great great grandparents. And I put it in a pretty frame and I have it hanging where I see it. And I really think of them quite often when I look at it. I took one of those little pages that I mentioned earlier from the ledger that my grandfather had written, my great grandfather had written on, and I framed it and I have that on the wall so that whenever I'm in that corner of my office, I see it and I think about him. I just love the idea that they are objects, but they really connect me to my ancestors. So attach a person and a story with it. Now, honestly, sometimes we may have something, an artifact, and not know anything about it just because it's beautiful or just because it's old and we love it, and that's fine. But it's good to attach a story if we can to it. And then we need to share these artifacts and stories with future generations. So we can do that digitally for now, at least, and then pass them on at a later time, give away or pass on to a museum. So it's really good for us right now to figure out, hey, what are we going to do with these things when we are gone? Who will have them? What if the next generation really doesn't care or really does not want them. Things, it's up to us. The buck stops here. We need to record the information and make sure that the history for these things are not lost. All right, so here I'm just going to give you a couple examples of a few things that I have, and I just feel so fortunate that I have these things. This is because, like I said, I've always been the one interested in old things and interested in family history. So I just put that out there that it's really good for you to let your family members know, hey, if you have things of grandpas or grandmas or things that were passed down in our family, please share them with me. At least take a picture, tell me the story, or if you have no one to pass them on to, pass them on to me. I have the things that I have only because my family knew that I would appreciate them. So this had nothing attached to it. It had no information. And it was just in a box that my father gave me of my grandfather's things. And he said, yeah, nobody else really wants this old stuff. Here you go. And so I found this little kit. I opened it up. This is a chaplain kit from World War II. My grandfather did fight in World War II. Now, he was not a chaplain. He was a lead scout. And I just wondered about this. I wondered, why did my grandpa bring out of all the things over? He was in Papua New Guinea on that jungle island. He carried this around with him. He found it somewhere and likely on a deceased chaplain, unfortunately, and it was important to him. Now, I knew my grandfather, of course, after World War II. I knew he was a very, very spiritual person. So to him, I am sure that having this little sacrament kit or Lord's Supper, the bread and the water, he was a Christian, was something that was very comforting to him. Something that is really interesting to me is as I've kept this and as we had our lockdown for COVID, my family and we were able to use this little kit for our own our own Lord's Supper or sacrament services. And it was a very connecting feeling to realize that this was something that had been with my grandfather and something that was important to him because he didn't keep a whole lot of things, but he did keep this. So jumping from this, you can also see we want to think about what else can we combine to get a story. So Grandpa had also in his box a medal. So he had this medal, and then he had a whole bunch of little pins to show where, what regiment he was in, what unit he was in. So I was able to go through these items and find out where my grandfather served. So when I did that, that led me to diaries of some of those that fought with him. And as I read these diaries and the accounts of what he went through, and he was in a particularly brutal unit, a unit that said these men were so traumatized that they literally had to be desensitized. They had to be reintroduced after the war to living with humans again and not just instantly fighting and instantly injuring and killing. And so knowing that, using these artifacts to research and know more about my grandpa, I realized why that this little kit thinking of his savior would have meant something to him. I am sure that it brought him comfort and peace. And for me to have it and to have been able to use it has been an amazing experience. So here's how we can take something that is kind of unknown, and you have to be a bit of a detective at times if there's no one there to tell you what things are. I had to research all this myself. If this is something you're not good at, I am sure that there is someone around you, a relative, or maybe a kid down the street. I'm sure my daughters could have even done a better job of me than this, but it's worth investigating and researching about items. So you can see this is an artifact that has brought me a lot of comfort and understanding. Okay, so here's another little thing. And I'm just showing ideas of what you can do because you have these things. So it's good for us to at least make maybe a little catalog of the things that we have, take a picture of it, put the story out there so that our posterity knows what these things are. So this is my husband's grandparents. They had this Japanese umbrella pot, and it always was sitting in their home, and I always admired it. I always thought, wow, that is just a really pretty piece of pottery. They lived on the island of Saipan, where Spencer Taggart, was basically the top military commander of the island. And so they acquired a lot of art when they were over there in the Pacific. And this is just one thing that they acquired. And they always really liked art. So going into their home, they always had beautiful pieces of art. But this made me think, did they live in Japan? Did they go there? How did they acquire this pot? How old is the pot and who is the artist? So something I would do here, I would look at the artist, I would look at the art, take a picture, and online, I am sure somewhere I can find out who created this. So what other things can I combine with this artifact to get a bigger picture? So I know that they were artistic, they were art collectors, they appreciated beauty. And I also know that they have 4 children that are alive today. And so one thing that I would do, that I will do, is go and talk to them. What do you remember about this pot? Why did grandma and grandpa have it in their home for years? What was important about it? What do you remember about the pot? Did you put umbrellas in the pot or was it used for something else? So I feel connected to these wonderful people by having this heirloom that was given to us. And they were a really interesting couple because as they got older, if you went over to their house and you said that you liked anything, they would gift it to you. So you had to be careful what you said, or they would just take paintings off the wall and give you clocks and anything that you were interested in. And I think it's because they wanted to be sure that the things they loved were passed on to someone who would love them as well. This is something that I think is just so cute. My grandfather had this hanging on his wall. Well, my grandparents had it hanging on their wall, and they had it there for years. This little tiny painting of this kid eating. We've got two boys here, and we've got a dog. And I always thought it was such a cute little painting. And one day I asked my grandpa about it. I said, well, tell me about this. I mean, it's actually not a super characteristic thing that would be, a piece of artwork like this in their home. And so he took it down off the wall and he showed me the back. And I think that this is so sweet. So look what was written on the back. And he wrote this. This is in his handwriting. So we have May 25 of 1933, to Marjorie from cousin Robert. Now that you are 13, I hope you will be the best girl I have ever seen. And that's very like my grandpa to write a little quip. He would do that on cards all the time and everything. What I know about my grandpa is I know that he always, his entire growing up life, was very, very poor. And so when I saw this pretty little picture, I thought, wow, that must have been an important person to him, because for him to actually go out and purchase something like this to give as a gift, it really would have been a sacrifice for him, and he would have really had to work for it. So some of the information I can learn from this is, where was he living? on this date, May 25th, 1933. And where was Marjorie living? Did they live close? Did he have to travel far? Where did this picture come from? Who is the artist? What is it titled? What does it mean? I can see why my grandpa would have loved it because, first of all, it has a dog in it. And anything with animals, my grandpa, I'm sure, just saw that dog and had to have the picture. Were their families close? Who were all of their cousins? Did they get together? Where were they all from? So, what else I could combine with this artifact to get a bit bigger picture? I do have some pictures of later years of all these cousins together with information written on the back. But I did learn from Grandpa when I looked at this cute little picture that this was his one of his favorite cousins, Marjorie. He really loved Marjorie and they just really got along. And so this is very meaningful to me. Not only is it just a pretty little piece of art, but it's got my grandpa's writing on it. And it was something that he obviously held dearly. I think that when Marjorie passed away, that this was given back to my grandpa. And I'm so grateful for that, which is also something to remember. It's okay, I think, especially after someone passes away, to maybe give something back that was meaningfully given to someone. Okay, this little bookshelf here is something that came to me in an amazing way. My great grandmother passed away. She lived in Edwardsburg, Michigan. At the time, my family, we had moved out to California, but all of our extended family members were living in Michigan, back in this little town, this little Edwardsburg, Michigan area. And this little table actually comes from my great grandmother. And when my great grandmother died, and this was in 1967, which coincidentally is the year that I was born, my mother was over in Germany. And she was very close to this grandmother, Daisy. She loved Daisy, and she was a wonderful grandma to her. And Daisy's family decided they would have an estate sale, and they just kind of sold everything in the home. My mom was always felt really upset that she didn't get anything of Daisy's because she was over in Germany when they had it. I'm sure a lot of people just thought, oh, this old junk, she's not going to want it. But years later, my grandmother from my father's side said to me, "Oh, Michelle, I just remembered, do you see that little table there?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "I purchased that little table from the auction that your mom's family held of your great grandmother's house, and I would like you to have it." So of course, I was so thrilled. I was amazed. And in talking to my mom, I learned so much more about my grandma Daisy, my great grandma Daisy, just by having this brought into my life. So here are some questions that I could ask. Where was this in her home? Who might have made it? What did she use it for? Why did she keep it? What did she put on it? So artifacts that I can combine for a bigger picture is, where was the location of the home, the year, what did the house look like? So you can see there are a lot of things that we could take from this little piece of furniture and expand on. Now, as an addendum to this story, I love this part. Just a few years ago, my mom had a high school friend of hers just show up at her house and knock on the door. And she said, "Hi, Jan. I just want to let you have this." She had this beautiful little wooden rocking chair. And she said, "I purchased this from your great grandmother's estate sale when I was just starting out. I needed a rocking chair, but I thought that you might like to have it." So it made its way back to my mom, who graciously gave it to me because she knows I like old things. And so now I have two pieces of furniture from my great grandmother's house. And I just think that that is really, really cool. So if we have things, it means it's meaningful to get them back to someone who cares about them. So I just took a little picture of my bookshelf here, and because I have several things on this bookshelf. It's a little blurry now that I look at it on the screen, but I'm just going to talk about a few things. First of all, this bookshelf is filled with children's books, and I do collect children's books. So these are all my favorite children's books that are on here that my lucky daughters are going to get someday. But I have a whole bunch of artifacts on here, and I'm just going to tell you about a few of them. So first, as you can see, this little painting. And this little painting, my daughter painted it for me, my daughter Abby, and I've just always loved it. I saw this picture on the wall in a restaurant that we were celebrating. I think it was my birthday, and I saw it and I just said, "Oh, Abby, I love that little picture. Could you do something like that for me?" And so she did this. So this is an artifact that is something that is a lot newer than the other things I have, but is very meaningful to me. So I need to write down how I acquired it on the back of it and tell that little story that I just told you. And someday Abby will get that back. I'm sure she is excited about that. And then down on the left here, I have some books. You can see I have got my Roald Dahl collection, which are books that I've always loved, some other little children's books I loved. But if you can see in there, there is a Red Betty Crocker cookbook. That was my grandmother Freeman's cookbook. And I love that book. Not only does it really still have a lot of great things in it, but my grandma used it and she would write little notes in there, like add a little extra salt, or this could use a little more mustard, or not a good recipe. So she kind of kept a little log of what she cooked in that book. And I love that. I love seeing her print on the book. I love that her hands held that I have something tangible that connect me to her. Over here on the top right, they're kind of blurry. These are just some little delicate figurines, and these were little figurines that my great grandmother had, that as we were cleaning out my grandmother's house, that she had, and I've always loved them and just thought they were so darling. So I put them on my bookshelf, and they are something that whenever I look at them, I think about my great grandma, and I can see why she really liked those. So another artifact that I have down here on the right, this is full of artifacts, but there's a little book there that is a book that I've always loved. We have a little Madeline doll, because the Madeline books, those are books that I shared with my daughters when they were younger, and it is something that reminds me of them and connects me to them as little girls. And then over on the right, you can see it a little better in the middle picture, but down on the third shelf on the right is a cloth covered container. And that is a container of my grandmother's knitting needles, every size that you can imagine. And I love having that. I love thinking about grandma every time I look at it. So not only are these things that are just sitting around, but because they have meaning to me, because they are artifacts from my family, I think about my ancestors, and I think about the things that she made with those. So we may have things that are falling apart, and we may have things that are more delicate. Here's this adorable little quilt that I have a great grandmother that made it. It is kind of falling apart. So I took a picture of it and I put it on memories in Family Search. And I just want to let you all know that that is such a great place to put things. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that. But a lot of times we wonder, where do we put all this stuff? Well, if we put it up on Family Search and Ancestry, they will always be there for those who come after us. So here I've got a little newspaper article about my grandfather, and I have taken a picture and I loaded it onto his family search profile. I tagged him in it, and it will always be there. It is always connected with him and tells a little bit about my grandpa. Along with his medal, I took a picture of this medal. It is starting to fray and getting kind of old, so that's connected to him. This little diary is something that my other grandfather wrote in, and so I have taken pictures of it and put it on his family search, so it's always there. His handwriting is preserved, and I've also taken that and typed it out and found all of the things that he mentions in it. So, for instance, he mentions that he went to the movie theater with his friends. So I looked up, I knew the area that they lived, I knew this date, and I figured out what movie theater that they would have gone to. He talks about his car getting, caught in a snowbank on a certain day. Well, I can go back and look that up. What was the weather on that day in Michigan? Usually it's snowy if it's the winter, but everything that he mentioned in there, he and his friends went ice skating. Well, where would they have gone ice skating if they lived in Edwardsburg, Michigan? What would they have done? So that's something that took me a long time, and I really enjoyed doing that. I also have a lot of tools that this grandpa of mine kept and that I was given when he passed away. We want to think about all of these artifacts as these are physical evidences that this person lived. If we don't document them, if we don't put them out there, then they're lost. If we don't put them where someone can access them, then they're kind of lost as well, unless we are diligent about passing them on and making sure that that person is diligent, and so on. When we think about a person, we think about objects we might have. We want to think about how a person is remembered after they're gone. If there is no one that remembers the person, if we may have something old, but if nobody knows who it belonged to, then those memories, that meaning is lost. It's just something that is old and there. But it is up to us to take the things in our power, the things that we have, and make sure that they're connected to our ancestors, to add them to your family tree. Again, Family Search Memories is an excellent, excellent way to do that. And Ancestry is also good. I just find the Family Search Memories app very easy. These are my pictures. I call them my pile of lost souls. And I've mentioned these in several of my classes because these are pictures that no one in my family remembered who they were. Even my 99-year-old grandma, she would look at it and just go, oh, I don't remember. And how sad is that? That is very sad. And I just think, wow, somewhere these people have families that would be interested to see these. We don't know who they are. So that's why it's really important to get fired up about doing this and to make sure that we attach information and make it accessible to all of our artifacts that we may have. Okay, so here's a little plug for the Memories app. This is something that is so easy to do with your phone. You can take a picture with your phone and click a button and it just, boom, it goes right up onto Family Search. You can tag a person and you can write a title. You can attach a story to it. So this is a great format. A great place to do this is to take a picture of an artifact that you might have, write a little story. It doesn't have to be huge. It just has to be a few sentences. Maybe one sentence will help. But this is a great place to do it, and we can easily attach it to people. So I just wanted to let you know that if you want to learn more about this, these here are the classes that I have taught about memories and about using narratives for our family artifacts. And if you are interested in learning more, you can go. This is the pathway. You just go to the BYU Family History Library website. You go to classes and webinars, Sunday classes, virtual classes archived by speaker. If you want to look at one of these classes that I've already taught, you can click my name, and then it'll bring up the classes that I have taught. So I just encourage you all to take the things that you might have and make sure that there's information attached to them so that it's not just a wooden spoon or it's not just a piece of paper with handwriting on it, but that those that come after you know what it is. Make sure to put those things on Family Search if you can, so that they are accessible by anybody related to that person. And then also remember to designate a person that will take these artifacts afterwards. And if it is not someone in your family, make sure that you have a museum, a historical society picked out, or someone that will benefit from this artifact. So I'm just going to read this last thing that Bill, who is in Texas, has written for us. He said, there's a saying, one has three deaths: when you take your last breath, when you're put into the ground, and the last time someone remembers and says your name for the last time. Wow. That's powerful. Thank you, Bill. Yes, let's remember that last one and postpone it as much as we can. Right there. That is a reason for you to take your stuff you have or take your pictures you have, figure out how to make them accessible and how to make them meaningful for those around you. Thank you so much, everybody. I love that. I'm going to copy that, Bill. Thank you. I love that saying.